So we were out here in the vineyard actually shooting a different video, and one of the things that occurred to me that might be interesting to look at is what Chardonnay looks like as opposed to what Cabernet looks like, both the vines and the grapes. So I just tore off a bunch of Cab and a bunch of Chard and a Cab leaf and a Chard leaf. Can anybody guess, looking at them here, which is which? Alright, so this is Cabernet and this is Chardonnay. And you get to the point where looking at this stuff, it's easy to identify sitting there in your car and looking out the window which is which. And the really obvious difference is the leaf. The Cabernet is going to be a relatively small leaf. It's just not, typically speaking, a super vigorous varietal in comparison to Chardonnay. It doesn't grow big and crazy like Chard, and the leaves are smaller. And it's got these dramatic cutouts. Smallish leaves with these big cutouts like that, and those jagged edges. But really, to me, it's the deep dramatic cutouts and the relatively small leaves on it that define Cab. I'm not an expert on this stuff because we don't grow a whole bunch of different varietals, but I know what Cab looks like and what Merlot looks like and what Chard looks like. And then you got the bunches. Now, it's not the world's most photogenic. Is this better here? It's not the world's most photogenic bunch of Cabernet, but it's a pretty good representation of what a good bunch of Cabernet should look like. The berries are pretty small, and there's some looseness in the bunch, and the bunch size is not real big. So what you're going to end up with is a high skin to flesh ratio on the individual berries, and that's good. That gives you varietal intensity and color and tannin. It's exactly what you want in Cabernet. And you know, I love this field. We're on the Stone Vineyard, and I love this field because it really just does that year in and year out. It makes small, loose bunches with these little shot berries that really just make dark, intense tannic wine. Okay, so here's Chardonnay. Now this is Chardonnay that grows right alongside the Cab. It's not super vigorous here either in Chardonnay, and from my perspective that's good. I don't like vigorous vineyards generally, but okay, Cab and Chard. You can see the Chard leaf is much bigger and frankly much more just kind of shapeless. It doesn't have any cutouts at all. If we were looking at a Merlot leaf, the Merlot leaf would be somewhere in between these two. It's bigger than the Cab leaf and it has cutouts, but they aren't as deep and dramatic as the Cab leaf. So the Chard leaf is just kind of a big palm-shaped thing with little jagged edges. And it's funny, you start to equate the way the vines look with the way the wine tastes. And one of the things, and I start to equate the beauty of Cabernet wine with the beauty of Cabernet vines. I mean, I don't think there's anything inherently more beautiful about this than this, but it could be said that this is a fairly bland-looking leaf, and that this is a fairly interesting, dramatic, tortured-looking little leaf, and that to some extent the same thing could be said about the wines. All right, and this is a bunch of Chardonnay. Now, this is a weird year for Chard, and it's relatively early in the development of the varietal, so I couldn't find one that is a really great representation of Chardonnay. Nonetheless, okay, there's this versus this. Typically, you get bigger bunches in Chardonnay than you do in Cabernet. This is an uncharacteristically small bunch, and you get bigger individual berries, and the berries are packed together. And the one thing that you can really see on this is that the berries are closely packed on the Chardonnay and that they're loose on the Cabernet. That makes Chardonnay particularly subject to mildew and rot. When it rains and this gets wet, you see all the space that's in there? That gives the individual berries time to dry out. The wind blows, the sun shines, and these things individually have enough room to be able to dry out. What happens in a Chardonnay bunch, on the other hand, is that when it rains, the rain gets stuck in all these little, and the moisture gets stuck in all these little crevices, and the skin is thinner, and so it really wants to rot, really wants to get botrytis, and at this time of year, things want to mildew. So, anyway, there you have it. Chardonnay versus Cabernet.